I never thought my own family would be my biggest critics. I had spent years building my business from the ground up, pouring in my sweat and energy, making sure it thrived. And eventually, it did. I made my fortune in an industry most people overlooked, one they took for granted until they needed it. I built a successful empire in toilet paper production. While some people made their money in stocks, real estate, or luxury goods, I found my success in something much more fundamental. And yet, despite my achievements, despite my ability to provide for myself and others, my family refused to take me seriously. 4 years of college for this, my father would say, shaking his head with a disappointed smirk whenever someone asked what I did for a living. My son is a great businessman. Every day, thousands of people think of him. Right when they're in the bathroom, my mother would joke, making everyone at the dinner table laugh. Even my older brother Ryan, who worked at a bank and barely made enough to get by, had something to add. Admit it, Alex, you're a millionaire thanks to the world's bathrooms. They all found it hilarious. To them, I wasn't a real businessman. I wasn't someone worthy of respect. But when they needed money, they suddenly forgot the jokes. When my parents couldn't pay their mortgage, I stepped in. When my mother wanted to remodel the house, I paid for it. When Ryan got into financial trouble, I helped him, and I never hesitated. No matter how much they belittled me, I continued to support them. But their condescension never stopped. No matter how much I provided, my money was still seen as less valuable because of where it came from. It wasn't enough that I had worked tirelessly to build a business. It wasn't enough that I had created jobs, helped people, and earned financial stability. To them, I would always be the guy who got rich off toilet paper, and that somehow made me a joke. One moment that particularly stung was when I bought my father a Rolex, his lifelong dream. A gold, elegant watch, the kind that makes you feel powerful just by looking at it. "What is this?" he asked in surprise as I handed him the box. "A gift," I said with a smile. He opened it, eyes widening. "Alex, this cost a fortune. Where did you get so much money?" "The business, Dad." His face immediately shifted. "Ah, of course, from toilet paper," he muttered with an ironic smile. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my frustration. "If you don't like it, I can return it." He stared at it for a few seconds before finally putting it on his wrist. "Well, since you already bought it?" That was how it always was. They took my money, but never my respect. A year later, we were at an upscale steakhouse celebrating my father's 60th birthday. It was a grand event, one that I had fully funded. I had paid for everything: the venue, the dinner, the wine, the live music. I had spared no expense, ensuring it would be a night to remember. My parents were surrounded by friends and family, all laughing, enjoying themselves, raising their glasses in celebration. I sat back in my chair, sipping my drink, feeling a small sense of satisfaction at having provided such a special evening. And then my father stood up. He held his glass high, a broad smile on his face. "I want to make a special toast," he announced loudly. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. I leaned forward slightly, expecting, hoping for some words of gratitude. Instead, he said, "Let's toast to my son, Alex, who thinks that throwing money at us will make us respect him more." Laughter erupted around the room. I felt a knot form in my stomach. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. But then, as I glanced around, I saw my mother giggling, Ryan chuckling, and the guests smirking as if this was just a harmless joke. "Excuse me," I asked, my voice controlled but tight. My father took a sip of wine and patted my shoulder. "Don't get upset, son. It's just a joke." Ryan grinned. "Yeah, bro, don't be so sensitive." My mother nodded, still smiling. "You know how your father is, he likes to joke around." I looked at all of them. These people I had given everything to. I had paid for their house, their luxuries, their dinners, and yet, in their eyes, I was still just a joke. I set my glass down on the table and stood up. "If my money means nothing to you, then I suppose you don't need it anymore." A hush fell over the table. My mother's smile faltered. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I put on my jacket, my voice steady and firm. "It means you won't receive a single cent from me anymore. From now on, you'll pay your own bills." Ryan scoffed. "Come on, don't be so dramatic." "This isn't drama, it's reality," I said. "If my money doesn't earn me respect, it won't buy you comfort either." My father set his glass down with force. "So you're just going to abandon us over a joke?" I looked him straight in the eye. No, Dad. You abandoned me a long time ago when you decided my success wasn't worth anything. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving them speechless behind me. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel, expecting to feel anger, sadness, or disappointment. But instead, I felt something else entirely: relief. For the first time in years, I didn't have to save anyone. I didn't have to worry about paying bills that weren't mine. I didn't have to listen to them laugh at me while taking my money without hesitation. That night, I slept better than I had in a long, long time. The first few days after I made my decision were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no messages. It was almost as if my parents hadn't noticed the financial support had stopped. But I knew better. They had noticed. They were just waiting for me to realize my mistake and come crawling back, apologizing like I always had. But I didn't. I stayed firm, and it wasn't long before the silence broke. The first message came a week later. It was from my mother. "Susan, son, did you forget to make the transfer this month?" I ignored it. A few hours later, another one. "Alex, sweetheart, we're a little tight on money this month. If you could send it soon, it would really help." I smirked at my phone. Tight on money? Of course, they were. They had built their lives around my income, my generosity. They had never once considered what would happen if I stopped paying. To them, I was an ATM that never ran out. A son who worked endlessly to ensure their comfort while they laughed at my success. Well, the ATM was officially closed. 2 days passed, and then my brother Ryan reached out. "Ryan, Mom is worried. She says you're not answering. What's wrong with you?" I still didn't reply. "Stop acting like you're offended. It's not that serious." That was when I couldn't hold back anymore. I'm not offended. I've just decided I'm not going to support you anymore." There was a long pause before his response came. "Are you insane? You're going to let our parents struggle just because you got upset over a toast?" "No, I'm going to let them take care of their own lives like responsible adults." Ryan didn't reply again that night. But I knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, reality hit them. The car payments were overdue. The gas bill went unpaid. The bank started calling about the mortgage. And then my mother did what she did best. She tried to manipulate me with guilt. She called while I was at the office. I debated letting it go to voicemail but decided to pick up, just to see what she would say. "Alex, son, please, we need to talk." I sighed. "What is it, Mom?" "I don't know what's going on with you, but enough time has passed. I miss you, sweetheart. Why don't you come over for dinner on Saturday?" "No, Mom, I'm not coming." "Please, son." Her voice was sickly sweet, almost pleading. "Let's just forget what happened, okay? Come home, let's have dinner together." I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to make me feel guilty, to lower my guard, but I wasn't falling for it. "This isn't about what happened at dinner, Mom. This is about the fact that you've been using me for years, and I'm not going to allow it anymore." Silence. Then her tone changed. "Alex, how can you say that? We're your family." "Yes, but to you, I've always been an ATM, and ATMs run out of money too." And I hung up. I knew this was only the beginning. People who get used to receiving everything without effort never give up without a fight. Sure enough, 2 days after my mother's call, the next phase began. The attack from all sides. First, it was my mother. "Susan, son, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're making a mistake. You can't turn your back on your family. We raised you with love. Are you really going to leave us like this? Your father won't say it, but he's suffering a lot. I can't believe you just stopped paying the bills without warning. How are we supposed to survive? Do you really want us to end up on the street? Alex, sweetheart, doesn't it hurt you to know that we're here in the dark because the electricity got cut off?" I ignored the messages. I wasn't going to fall into that emotional trap again. But then they started calling my friends. "Alex, your mom texted me. She's worried. She says you're not answering and that the family is in trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed bitterly. "They never had trouble while spending my money. Look, I don't want to get involved, but maybe you could help them out a little. They're your parents." I hung up. I wasn't going to listen to that guilt trip. Then they did what I hated most. They tried to use family against me. First, it was Aunt Karen. "Karen, Alex, what's going on? Your parents are desperate. Look at everything they've done for you. They're older. Don't be resentful. Your mother told me they don't even have internet now. How are they supposed to find a job if they can't even send resumes? Do you expect your father, at his age, to go out looking for a job like some poor laborer? Is that what you want? I blocked her number. I knew she didn't actually care about my parents. She just loved the drama. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon while I was driving home from work, my phone rang. An unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Yes? Alex. It was Ryan, and he sounded furious. What do you want? I want to know when you became such a selfish, heartless fool. I smiled bitterly. Ah, so now I'm the selfish one. What else would you be? Mom and Dad are on the verge of collapse, all because you decided to throw a tantrum. It's not a tantrum, it's a boundary. You're unbelievably ungrateful. Oh, for refusing to keep being their ATM? For leaving them in this situation without warning. You didn't even have the decency to prepare them for this. I laughed. Prepare them? Ryan, they're adults. Why would I need to prepare them to pay their own bills? Because they never had to before. You took advantage of them and then abandoned them. I ran a hand over my face. The level of absurdity was unbelievable. So, according to you, it's my fault that they chose to depend on me? Of course it is. How do you expect them to get used to living without your help when you've given them everything for years? Well, Ryan, I guess they'll have to learn quickly. There was a tense silence, and then he said the one thing that changed everything. If Dad ends up in the hospital from the stress you're causing him, it'll be your fault. And that's when I laughed. Because they had finally run out of strategies and were using their last card, guilt. If Dad ends up in the hospital, Ryan, it'll be because he never learned how to manage his own life. And I hung up. I knew this wasn't over yet. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was free. The silence after my departure was deafening. At first I thought my parents and brother had taken my words to heart, that maybe, just maybe, they would finally realize what they had done. But deep down, I knew them too well. They weren't the type to sit back and accept reality. They were strategists, manipulators, and users. And I was about to experience the next phase of their tactics. It started with small things. My mother sent a few texts, acting like nothing had happened. Sweetheart, I made your favorite lasagna today. Why don't you come over for dinner? Then another. Your father misses you, Alex. He may not say it, but I know he does. I ignored them all. A week passed, and the messages shifted. Alex, you forgot to send the usual transfer. The mortgage is due soon. That was the moment I knew they weren't going to change. They didn't see me as a son. I was their personal bank account. Then my brother Ryan tried. He showed up at my office, unannounced, as if I owed him a meeting. He sat down across from me, looking frustrated, as if I was the one causing him problems. Come on, Alex, he started. You're being dramatic. Dad was just joking, you know that. You can't actually be serious about this. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I'm dead serious, Ryan, and it's funny how you're all scrambling now that your free ride is gone. His jaw clenched. That's not fair. We're family. Family helps each other. Really? I tilted my head. Because for years, I was the only one doing the helping. You all took my money, my time, and my effort, and in return, you laughed at me. Tell me, Ryan, did you ever once stand up for me when Dad mocked my business? When Mom made fun of how I make a living? He had no response. He just sighed, rubbing his temples. You're overreacting. Just send the money, and we can all move on. I laughed, shaking my head. That's the problem, Ryan. I've moved on. And you're still waiting for me to fix everything. Not this time. He left, cursing under his breath. I could see the panic in his eyes. They weren't prepared for this. They had spent years relying on me, expecting me to always be there, and now that I wasn't, they had no clue how to fend for themselves. Days passed. Then came the next phase, guilt tripping. My mother called, and against my better judgment, I answered. Alex, please, she started, her voice trembling. Your father isn't doing well. He's stressed about the bills, about everything. This is breaking us apart. I clenched my jaw. No, Mom. What's breaking you apart is the fact that you never planned for this. You always assumed I'd be here to clean up your mess. We raised you, she snapped, her tone shifting from pleading to anger. We gave you everything. No, Mom, I said coldly. I gave you everything. Silence. Then came the last card they had to play. Public humiliation. I woke up one morning to a flurry of messages from friends, colleagues, and even distant relatives. Confused, I checked my social media. And there it was, a long, dramatic post from my mother, written to paint herself as the victim. It's heartbreaking when a child turns his back on his parents. We always did our best for Alex, and now, when we need him the most, he has abandoned us. We're struggling, but we'll survive somehow. All we ever wanted was love and respect, but money changes people. If anyone knows of a job for two elderly parents who worked hard all their lives, please let us know. My blood boiled. They had framed it perfectly, making it seem like I was the villain. Comments flooded in. How could he do this to his own parents? Disgusting. No child should abandon their family. What kind of person refuses to help the people who raised him? I should have been angry. I should have lashed out. But instead, I laughed. Because this was the final act of desperation. They had run out of ways to control me, and now they were begging strangers for sympathy. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't argue with the flood of opinions. Instead, I went about my day. Because I had already won. They could cry, manipulate, and play the victims all they wanted. But at the end of the day, they were still the ones who had to figure out how to survive without me. A few days later, Ryan called again. This time, his voice wasn't angry. It was desperate. Alex, please, they're losing everything. The house, the car, even their credit is ruined. Not my problem, Ryan. They're our parents. No, I said firmly. They were two people who thought it was funny to humiliate me while taking my money. They never respected me, and now I don't respect them. Ryan sighed heavily. So that's it? You're just gonna let them suffer? They're not suffering. They're experiencing the consequences of their own actions. And so are you. Goodbye, Ryan. I blocked his number. Weeks turned into months. My parents sold their house, downsized to a small apartment, and finally had to learn what it meant to live within their means. My mother found a part-time job at a retail store. My father, humiliated and bitter, refused to work and spent his days sulking at home. Ryan? He struggled the most. He had always lived off the family's money, and without my support, he quickly found himself drowning in debt. One night, I received an email from an unknown sender. Alex, I know I don't deserve a response, but I just wanted to say, I understand now. I see what we did. I see how we treated you, and I see why you left. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect help. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, Mom. I read it twice, and then, without hesitation, I deleted it. Because I had already forgiven them. Not for them, but for myself. And for the first time in my life, I was truly free. For the first few weeks, my phone remained silent. No messages, no calls, no desperate pleas. It was eerie, almost unsettling, like the calm before a storm. I had expected my parents to explode the moment I walked out of that restaurant, cutting off their financial support. But instead, there was silence. Then slowly, the first cracks began to show. The first sign was the unpaid mortgage. My mother had always taken pride in her perfectly decorated home, boasting about the imported furniture and the grand staircase that made the house feel like a palace. But maintaining a lifestyle like that required money, money that they no longer had access to. It started with a few late payments, then a notice from the bank. Soon, the whispers began. Relatives started calling me, their voices laced with concern and subtle accusations. Alex, I heard your parents are struggling. Are you really not going to help them? I would sigh and repeat the same line, over and over again. They're adults, they can figure it out. Some relatives understood, others did not. But I stood firm. I had spent years being their safety net, the person they turned to every time they found themselves in financial trouble. This time, they would have to fend for themselves. Then came the guilt trips. My mother, the queen of manipulation, started texting me daily. Alex, sweetheart, the electricity bill is overdue. Your father is so stressed. Can't you just help this once? Alex, I'm not asking for much, just a little to keep the water running. Son, please, we're your family. How can you do this to us? Each time, I deleted the messages without responding. I refused to let myself be dragged back into their web. But the final blow came 2 months later when I received an official letter from the bank. At first, I thought it was junk mail. But when I opened it, my blood ran cold. My parents had tried to refinance their mortgage, using my name. I stared at the document, my hands shaking with fury, They had forged my signature. They had actually tried to put their financial burden on me, without my knowledge or consent. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was fraud. I grabbed my phone and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring. "Alex, I knew you'd call," she said, her voice trembling. "You really thought you could steal from me and get away with it?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "It's not stealing. It was just a mistake. We planned to pay it back," she insisted. "With what money, Mom? You have no income. Dad can barely cover his own expenses. Or were you expecting me to fix this too?" Silence. Then in a broken whisper, she said, "We had no other option." "Yes, you did. You could have worked. You could have sold the house and moved somewhere cheaper. But instead, you chose to deceive me." She started crying. "Your father didn't want to do it. It was my idea. I don't care whose idea it was. You're both responsible. Son, if you report this, you'll ruin us." There it was. The last desperate attempt to guilt me. If I pressed charges, they might face legal consequences. Their house would almost certainly be repossessed. Their reputation would be destroyed. But that wasn't my fault. They had put themselves in this situation. "Mom, you're not my problem anymore." "Alex, please. We're your family." I took a deep breath. "No, you're just two people who tried to take advantage of me, and I'm done." And I hung up. The next day I went straight to the bank. I explained the situation and provided evidence that I had nothing to do with the mortgage. My parents were officially notified a few weeks later. Their house was put up for auction. They tried to stop the process, but there was nothing they could do. In the end, they were forced to move into a small apartment. No luxuries, no comforts, just a modest space they could afford on their own. And of course, Ryan didn't take long to come looking for me. One day, I ran into him outside my office. He looked worse than ever. Dark circles under his eyes, disheveled clothes, an expression of pure desperation. "We need to talk," he said. "There's nothing to talk about." "Alex, please. Dad is sick. Mom is devastated. They can't live like this. This is how normal people live, Ryan. It's not my fault they don't know what it means to earn a living. But you have money. It wouldn't cost you anything to help them." "Exactly. It wouldn't cost me anything, and that's why I won't do it." He looked at me with pure hatred. "You only think about yourself." I tilted my head. "And you've been taking advantage of me for too long, but at least I know how to live without depending on anyone." I turned my back on him and walked into my office. I knew that was the last time I would see him. 6 months passed. During that time, my business continued to grow. I traveled. I enjoyed my life. I focused on what truly mattered. One day, while checking my emails, I saw a message from an unknown number. It simply said, "I hope you're doing well, Mom." I stared at it, thought about everything that had happened, and then, without hesitation, I deleted it. Because for the first time in my life, I was free. The fallout from my decision was something I had expected, but I never imagined just how far my parents would go to maintain their comfortable lifestyle at my expense. The initial silence was deafening. No calls, no messages, just an eerie absence of their usual demands. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had accepted reality and were figuring things out on their own. But I was wrong. 2 months after I cut them off, a letter arrived in the mail from the bank. At first I thought it was a routine statement, or maybe some promotional nonsense. But as I scanned through the words, my blood ran cold. It was a notification about an attempt to refinance a mortgage, under my name. My parents had tried to put me into debt without my knowledge, forging my signature in the process. My hands clenched into fists as I reread the letter, trying to process the sheer audacity of what they had done. It wasn't just about money anymore. This was fraud. This was theft. This was a betrayal that went beyond the years of emotional manipulation and guilt-tripping. I wasted no time. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. The line rang twice before she picked up, her voice feigning innocence. "Alex, I knew you would call. We've missed you so much." "Cut the act, Mom," I snapped. "You tried to put a mortgage under my name without my permission. That's illegal. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Silence. Then a deep sigh. "We had no other choice," she said, her tone shifting from sweetness to annoyance. "The bank wouldn't approve us on our own. We knew you'd help. You always do." I laughed bitterly. "Help? You mean you tried to steal from me? That's not help, that's fraud." Do you understand that I could press charges? You and Dad could go to jail. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Alex, she said, brushing off my anger as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. We planned to pay it back. We just needed a little assistance. With what money? I challenged. Neither of you have jobs. You've spent every dime I've ever given you on luxuries instead of securing your future. How exactly were you going to pay it back? She had no answer to that. Instead, she tried a different tactic, one I had seen many times before. Son, if you report this, you'll ruin us. The house? We'll lose everything. You don't want that, do you? You don't want your own parents homeless? And there it was, the last card they had left to play. Guilt. I took a deep breath. No, Mom, you ruined yourselves. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Please, Alex, she whispered, and for the first time there was a genuine hint of desperation in her voice. We're your family. No, I said firmly. You were my responsibility, but not anymore. And with that, I hung up. The next day, I went straight to the bank. I provided evidence that I had never agreed to the loan, that my signature had been forged. Legal action was taken immediately. My parents were formally notified, and within weeks, their house was put up for auction. They tried to fight it, but without financial backing, they had no chance. In the end, they were forced to move into a small rental apartment. No luxuries, no comfort, just the consequences of their own actions. It wasn't long before Ryan came knocking on my door. I was leaving my office when I saw him standing outside, looking worse than I had ever seen him, his clothes disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, a desperate edge in his expression. We need to talk, he said. I sighed, already knowing where this was going. There's nothing to talk about, Ryan. Yes, there is. He stepped forward, his voice rising. Dad is sick. Mom is devastated. They can't live like this. I crossed my arms. This is how normal people live, Ryan. They work. They pay their own bills. They take responsibility for their actions. It's not my fault they never learned how. But you have money, he practically shouted. It wouldn't cost you anything to help them. I shook my head. Exactly, it wouldn't cost me anything, and that's why I won't do it. Because they need to learn, and so do you. Ryan stared at me, pure hatred in his eyes. You're heartless. No, I said calmly. I'm just done. I turned and walked into my office, leaving him standing there. I knew, deep down, that was the last time I would ever see him. 6 months passed. My business continued to grow. I traveled, enjoyed my life, and focused on what truly mattered. Then one day, while checking my emails, I noticed a message from an unknown number. The subject line read, "I hope you're doing well." I opened it. It was from my mother. Alex, we just wanted to say we miss you. We hope you're okay. We don't want to fight anymore. Please, let's put the past behind us. Love, Mom. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. And then, with absolute certainty, I deleted it without responding. A month later, I was in a meeting when one of my business partners gave me a curious look. Alex, what happened with your family? I raised an eyebrow. Why do you ask? He slid his phone across the table. I glanced down and immediately understood. My parents had tried again. They had made another public plea for money, this time carefully avoiding mentioning me by name. The post painted them as victims, as elderly parents abandoned by their successful son, left to struggle in misery. The comments were a mix of sympathy and outrage. How can a son be so cruel? If only we knew who he was, we'd boycott his company. Parents sacrifice everything for their children. He should be ashamed. I laughed under my breath and pushed the phone back. Nothing to worry about. They're just learning to live without me in their own way. I didn't check the post again. I didn't care. Because finally, I was free.